The Big Bay Boom fireworks show goes bust. I'm Dwayne Brown. The reason for the 4th of July failure tonight on KPBS Evening Edition.
And I'm Peggy Pico. Tonight at the round table, we'll find out if the living wage is really helping San Diego workers, plus details on the rocks instead of ropes plan to separate seals from sunbathers at the children's pool.
And where most of us might see old buildings and sports venues, some young architects are seeing a new future for San Diego. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. It's the day after a disastrous 4th of July fireworks display over San Diego Bay. Tens of thousands of folks were downtown last night to see an exciting, elegant show. Instead, they saw virtually all the fireworks explode in a fireball within seconds of going off. We've now gotten some answers to what went wrong. KPBS reporter Tom Fudge is following the story. He joins us from the News Center. What can you tell us, Tom?
Well, what I can tell you is that today we got some answers to the questions that everybody had last night. Of course, everybody was wondering what's going on. Why aren't we seeing the fireworks, and why did they all explode in the first 30 seconds? Well, today we heard from a gentleman whose name is August Santori, and August Santori is co-owner of Garden State Fireworks, a New Jersey company that was the operator of the fireworks show last night that went all awry. And he said the problem was not human error, the problem was not the fireworks themselves, the problem was a computer glitch. It was a problem with computer programming. Let's hear a little bit from what he had to say.
Anyone who's ever had any kind of computer situations or otherwise, it's not perfect.
It's not perfect, and last night it definitely was not perfect. But Dwayne, no matter what the problem was, no matter what the explanation, the fact is this company screwed up big time and made a lot of people very unhappy.
So, Tom, how is this going to be resolved?
Well, there are really two questions. First of all, how do you make it right for the many angry patrons, the many angry San Diegans who went out there to see fireworks and weren't able to see fireworks? And number two, how do you make it right for the sponsors who put up hundreds of thousands, literally hundreds of thousands of dollars to make this happen? Well, first of all, Garden State Fireworks has said that they're willing to do a free show in return for messing up the first show. The only problem with that is a gentleman named Sandy Purdon, who's the executive director of the Big Bay Boom. It was renamed unofficially the Big Bay Bust, but that's another issue. He said even if Garden State is willing to do a free fireworks show, that doesn't pay nearly the amount of money that you need to have the show, because you need to rent barges, you need to get permitting, you need to get security. All told, they spent about $350,000 on this program, and it's difficult to know where that money is going to come from to get another fireworks show.
All right, KPBS reporter Tom Fudge. 4th of July beach crowds usually leave mountains of trash to pick up, but this year there was a lot less debris. KPBS reporter Kenny Goldberg tells us city crews swept up early this morning and volunteers made sure things were spick and span.
The volunteers were out in force at Ocean Beach. Equipped with trash picker-uppers, buckets, and bags, the cleaners combed the beach inch by inch. The San Diego chapter of the Surfrider Foundation organized a massive cleanup. Staff member Haley Hagerstone says there's been a lot less trash since the drinking ban on city beaches took effect in 2008.
Rewind a few years back before the drinking ban, we saw it, day and night. It was a war zone out here, and definitely seen people be a lot more responsible because of that ban and not as much garbage. But there is still, cigarette butts and wrappers of food and bottles and things like that.
Believe it or not, the #1 item of litter at Ocean Beach was marshmallows. After last night's annual marshmallow fight, the sticky treats were everywhere.
Honestly, I have a ton of them under here, man. I'm about to start my own bonfire after I'm done cleaning up. I have them all under my shoes, for real. Yeah, but they all over the place, man. Look like it snowed bricks, white bricks or something.
By mid-morning, things were looking pretty good. Volunteer Melanie Rogers said she actually enjoyed cleaning up.
San Diego's a beautiful place. The beach is a beautiful place, and want to keep it that way.
KPBS reporter Kenny Goldberg, the Surfrider Foundation says volunteers picked up more than 13,000 cigarette butts today. The California Senate has passed what some are calling the anti-Arizona bill. The Trust Act would restrict who police can hold for deportation. Only people with convictions for violence or other serious crimes could be held. The measure now goes to the state assembly. The third-place finisher in Mexico's presidential election is now joining the chorus of complaints about campaign spending and alleged vote buying. The initial vote count gave the win to Enrique Peña Nieto of the PRI by a 6-point margin. His opponents accused the PRI of excessive campaign spending, and one is not conceding defeat because of it. The other says election laws should be changed. San Diego Mayor Jerry Sanders is asking state lawmakers to leave the city's pension reform plan alone. Democratic leaders have been looking at reform on the state level. Senate Leader Darrell Steinberg told UT San Diego talks have included possible preemption of local measures such as Prop B. It was passed, of course, by 2/3 of San Diego voters last month. In a letter to the Assembly Speaker, Mayor Sanders says any attempt to nullify their vote would be a slap in the face and an outright insult to the democratic process. This week, Governor Brown asked for more time to work on pension reform for state workers. A union group says San Diego's Convention and Visitors Bureau is trying to get around paying a living wage to convention center workers. KPBS reporter Katie Orr joins us from the News Center. Why does this labor group think ConVis, Katie, is trying to skirt the living wage ordinance?
Well, Dwayne, earlier this year, the City Council handed over marketing duties for the public convention center to the private San Diego Convention and Visitors Bureau. In the contract proposed between the two organizations, there was a clause saying ConVis would be exempt from San Diego's living wage ordinance. Now, the clause was later struck from the contract, but Lorena Gonzalez with the San Diego Imperial County's Labor Council says it's still a bad sign.
Concerned about is on the very first action that they were putting forward, the first thing that they tried to do is exempt themselves from the living wage. The fact that they didn't get the legalities right, I think, is secondary to the fact that their intentions are very clear.
Now, is it possible, Katie, the convention center can get around the living wage?
Not through a contract. The City Council would have to approve an exemption from the ordinance. The living wage is currently set at $13.77 an hour. Now, KPBS tried to get a statement from ConVis today, but the president was unavailable.
KPBS Metro reporter Katie Orr. San Diego is among hundreds of cities around the country with a living wage ordinance. Peggy Pico is looking into the impact of the law on San Diego workers and contractors.
California's minimum wage is $8 an hour. San Diego passed the living wage in 2005. It pays $13.77 an hour, including health benefits. Joining me to talk about how the living wage is affecting people working in San Diego is Corinne Wilson, Policy Director for Center on the Policy Initiative. Now, Corinne, I have to ask you, the living wage has been in place here for 7 years in San Diego. How is this actually impacting workers here?
You know, it's really helping workers. In 2010, 17.4% of San Diego County residents were living in poverty, and the minimum wage actually keeps people in poverty if it's a single person and especially with a family. But if you're making the living wage, that's enough to pull a family of 4 out of poverty.
Have you heard from workers who are paid the living wage here? And, it begs the question, can you really, even with the living wage, support a family on it?
It's difficult because of the cost of living in San Diego. It is enough for a single person, but what we're hearing from workers is it makes a difference. What I've heard is that workers are able to help their elderly family members with the cost of prescription medicines, or they're able to help their children go to college, or they themselves are able to go back to school and better themselves and perhaps look for a better paying career.
So it's an improvement, but there's certain criteria. Who's actually eligible to get a living wage, I guess, or qualify for the living wage?
So the way it works is that when the city of San Diego contracts out for certain typically low-wage work, such as landscaping, security guards, janitors, or jobs at city-owned facilities like Petco Park, Qualcomm, or the convention center. There it's food handlers, food preparers, typical low-wage work. Then those workers are eligible and get paid the living wage.
So as city workers but they're contracted for the city. I get that. Now, coming back to the convention center, I want to briefly mention that the Convention and Visitors Bureau, they've been exploring, we've heard, looking around or maybe trying to sidestep this living wage. Can they legally do that?
This is the law. This was intended to make sure that jobs that receive public money do not create poverty jobs. So this is the law, and it needs to be upheld. So we'll just see how that goes.
Right, it's the law. So if they are trying to avoid it, there could be some legal repercussions on that. How about the employers, the contractors in San Diego who are paying living wages? Do they say it's beneficial, or what's their take on it?
The city performed a survey, asked the living wage employers how they felt about the living wage, and they reported that in fact they've seen an increase or an improvement in the quality of service that they're able to provide, and also a decrease in absenteeism and turnover with their employees. So they felt that that was actually a good benefit for them.
All right, Corrine Wilson, thank you so much for being here today. You answered
thank you.
A lot of our questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
The Santa Isabel Resort and Casino has filed for bankruptcy protection. The casino owes more than $3 million to San Diego County and millions more to other creditors, including a tribe in Arizona. It's actually threatening to foreclose on the property. The casino has struggled since it opened 5 years ago near Lake Hinshaw. Officials say bankruptcy is a chance to right-size its debt while allowing operations to continue as usual. State prison officials say they miscalculated the effect of changing where convicted criminals serve their time. Originally, they thought changing state law would shift 2 criminals a year to local jails for weapons possession and other crimes. Now, they say the number is closer to 250 a year. They say their research department made an error. California has been shifting inmates to local jails since October because of court orders to reduce prison overcrowding. The head of California's high-speed rail authority says the project is dead if the legislature doesn't fund it. Lawmakers are considering more than $4 billion in state financing. The package has already been passed by the Assembly, but its support is uncertain in the Senate. The project's backers say if the Senate says no, California could lose federal funding. Governor Brown is one of those supporters. A new field poll says high-speed rail could hurt Brown in the fall. It finds 1/5 of voters would be less likely to support his tax measure if lawmakers approve funding for the high-speed rail project. The tax measure still leads with 54% support. Pollsters found Democrats were more likely to be in favor than Republicans.
The California Coastal Commission is expected to meet next week about the city's plan to use a year-round rope to segregate harbor seals and beachgoers at the children's pool in La Jolla. But lifeguards say it won't work. Ed Harris, head of the Lifeguard Union, joins us tonight to talk about an alternative boulder barrier. Ed, thanks so much for joining us here today. And I think probably the first thing is we have to explain what is this barrier?
Well, it's a separation. The seals enjoy the beach in the wintertime, but they really don't like it when it's hot in the summer. Children really don't use it in the winter, but they sure want to be down there in the summer. So a boulder barrier separates different percentages of the beach at different times of the year, and that way there's access to all, and the seals are protected better. It's not just a rope that you can go under and over.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Maybe we can take a look at what the map is. Kind of, we're looking at it right now. What are we looking at? Explain to me. This is the children's pool in La Jolla.
Yeah, so you're looking at a summer edition of that plan, and so it keeps about 25% of the beach where the seals tend to like the most down by the wall, and it surrounds them with a rock a rock barrier so that we don't have people petting them, we don't have people going up to them. It keeps people further away.
And that's what this is supposed to do, keep them further away. Problems with the rope barrier right now, it seems like, you know, obviously to people, we know that's when you're supposed to stop.
Yeah, unfortunately, the rope barrier, there's not a law. And so people walk up and they see a completely open beach with no seals on it, and they walk out. Or they see the seals all the way across the beach. And so they walk past the rope, forget about the rope, and walk right up to the seals.
Well, that can't be good. Tell me what you've seen. You've been over at the children's pool for years and years now. What are you seeing as far as harassment or inappropriate behavior? Either by the visitors or, I have to say, the seals themselves.
Yeah, harassment of the visitors, of the tourists. You know, nobody has a right to make kids cry. Even public servants, my lifeguards have been put on YouTube. They've been put on everything. They've been harassed. And so nobody has that right. But people continue to yell at kids, to yell at people, and to interject themselves as an activist when they don't have the right to do so.
So these are people who are trying to protect the seals or sea lions that are there, yelling at each other. How about actually toward the animals? Is anybody going after them? You know, I don't see, I see innocent, naive people try to pet them, try to do other things, stuff like that. But both groups are guilty of harassing. All right. Harassing each other, we should say. So is this a dangerous situation here? I have personally overheard people say, no, they're more afraid of us than we are them. And as far as the seals go, is this dangerous?
The seals in the water aren't afraid of you at all. In fact, they come up and they scratch you and they play with you and they do all kinds of stuff. On the land, I believe they feel vulnerable, and I think they need a place behind the boulders where they have a place of their own that people aren't going to get near them and they can relax.
Where they feel safe. Now, how big are these boulders? How do you move them, and how much is it going to cost?
Well, that's the nice part about it, is it's city equipment. We move thousands of pounds of sand every year from all of the beaches, and so it can be moved with existing staff, existing bulldozers. They may need some augmented money to augment the staff, but it's not a big process. Twice a year, you would go in, lift the boulders, move them over, clean up some of the sand that's contaminated with feces. You have to imagine if nobody cleaned up the dog park that you go to ever. We have 300 seals, and no one's ever cleaned up the contamination there, and so we got to start looking at that.
Right, that was going to be my next question. So there is contamination in that children's pool, bacteria levels in the water and also in the sand.
Absolutely. I mean, the pool is a man-made structure, and it traps. It's the only place that I know in Southern California that's not flushed out by the west swell, the north swell, or the south swell. And so you need something to go in. We got to clean it. Just like we built it, it's artificial. We got to clean it.
All right. Now, you're going to bring this to the La Jolla Community Planning Board tomorrow night. Is that enough, this plan, this boulder barrier plan to them, is that enough time to get it before the Coastal Commission?
Well, it'll actually go to them tonight. It's already been to Parks and Beaches, but already the community groups have voiced their opinion not to support the rope. And so we're concerned that the Coastal Commission might come in and vote something that's not embraced, I guess, by the community itself.
All right, so if they sort of say no to the rope, but they're not necessarily saying yes to the boulders. Correct,
and that would give us time to come back and get the groups together, get both sides back to the table and present the plan, and something that everybody can be happy with, and if they buy into it, they're less likely to fight, which is somewhere in the middle, somewhere reasonable. Try to get to a point where everybody can get along.
All righty, Ed Harris, thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
There's a new blackout rule in the NFL, but it won't have any impact in San Diego. Traditionally, games that don't sell out have been blacked out on local television. It happened twice last year in San Diego, but this year, the NFL is letting teams set the bar lower so they could lift a blackout with as little as 85% of the seats sold. The catch: teams have to choose the threshold by July 15th, and they're stuck with that number throughout the season. Whenever a team's sales hit the threshold, they have to share more revenue with the visiting team. Apparently, Chargers owner Alex Spanos says that's just too much. He wants a more flexible rule allowing changes to the threshold. A lot of people wonder what to do with Qualcomm if the Chargers stop playing football there. Some fourth-year architecture students in San Diego wondered the same thing. KPBS reporter Tom Fudge tells us how they imagine the future of that and some other San Diego landmarks.
A shopping center, a football stadium with a huge parking lot. You might not think of them being anything else, but students at San Diego's new School of Architecture and Design took that imaginative leap, and they use those places as laboratories for progressive urban planning.
It's part of our mission to be heavily engaged in the urban community, and so we take on projects that are very real, very tangible.
The fourth-year students tackled 4 redevelopment projects in all. One posed the question, what do you do with the 166-acre Qualcomm Stadium site if and when the Chargers abandon it? The site is now a stadium surrounded by one of the country's largest parking lots. It's prime real estate owned by the city, and it lies along the San Diego River. Frank Walden was the faculty advisor for students who examined the Qualcomm site.
One of the early dialogues with the class was, what do you do with the existing stadium?
The verdict was to keep the stadium, but maybe not all of it. The students definitely did not want to lose the stadium's historic meaning.
It touches something specific within the San Diego community and all the football fans, so we wanted to keep it as a form of like something as the Colosseum in Rome, where we preserve it but as well make it still where it still has a function.
This is a model of the reimagined Qualcomm Stadium site. This is the location of the old stadium, but it's no longer a stadium. It's been turned into an amphitheater. People would sit here in front to watch concerts and other events you might imagine. From here, leading down to the river, is a green park, and surrounding the stadium in other directions is a fairly dense development. Apartments, condos, businesses, and some green spaces. This new development would generate revenue for the city and provide housing. The San Diego River would be rechanneled to make it more integral to the site. Walden hopes the project reflects modern development principles,
such as the role of nature in the city, such as the role of sustainability. When the students talk about this, they'll talk about the pedestrian orientation, the walkability of the community.
And walkability is a good segue to our next planning project, the University Town Center Mall. Today, UTC Mall, which lies between I-5 and the 805, is pretty typical. It has big department stores that house anchor tenants and oceans of parking, much of it empty most of the time. Faculty advisor Mike Stepner says his students wanted to combine housing and a variety of transport modes to bring residents closer to the shopping center.
What do you do to attract people here? How do you really increase the critical mass of people that live in the area so that you have more customers within a short distance from the shops, instead of you driving 15 miles to go to Sears?
This is a graphic presentation of the redeveloped UTC Mall site. This is a trolley line, the red, which runs along Genesee, and this is the center of the mall, which they basically turned into a street grid with lots of shops. Of course, this is still supposed to be a shopping center, but also some residential units mixed in where you see the yellow. This blue is supposed to be an extension of UC San Diego, and over here, this blue is supposed to be the relocated neighborhood public library. Stepner says a lot of surface parking would be eliminated, and much of the existing mall would be torn down in order to create what looks more like a small town center with an evolving collection of small businesses.
It seems like businesses are moving all the time, or they're changing location, or they're spreading apart.
The students also tried to solve the problem of traffic-clogged multi-lane roads that surround UTC.
We shrunk them down and made them easier to cross.
Could the visions of these students become real and withstand the battles of politics and economics? For now, it's enough to dream and to get a decent grade.
Tom tells us an executive of Westfield, which runs the UTC Mall, attended the presentations and gave some feedback to students. He said their ideas were intriguing, but they would be, quote, tough to implement considering the diverse requirements of the many stakeholders with an interest in the property. another happy homecoming today at Naval Base San Diego. The USS Sterett is back after 7 months in the Middle East and Western Pacific. The Sterett took part in military exercises and counter-piracy operations.
In tonight's Public Square, we're talking about big bangs, starting with Wednesday's worldwide announcement of the likely discovery of a new subatomic particle that may alter our understanding of the universe and how it works. Carl Flores challenged the discovery. He wrote, "The physics is theoretical, but the fun is real. These guys will never have to buy another drink in a bar near a campus where science is very strong." But the big bang more San Diegans were talking about today on social media was the entire 40-second firework fizzle at San Diego's Big Bay Boom display last night. That's it. That's pretty much it. Chris Franco wrote this observation: great potential, but fell short due to mismanagement. I think Alex Spanos was running the show. Jordan Snodgrass seemed to like the brevity. He wrote, "Best fireworks I've ever seen. No joke." But Patty O'Reilly put things in perspective with her comment. On Facebook, she wrote, "Be thankful. No one was injured." You can weigh in on this conversation or other Evening Edition stories by following us on Twitter, liking us on Facebook, or email us at publicsquare@kpbs.org.
Recapping tonight's top stories, a computer glitch is blamed for last night's fireworks flop on San Diego Bay. Organizers say an error in their computer system made all the fireworks on 4 barges go off simultaneously. The company, Garden State Fireworks, says it will try to make things right and has offered to put on another show for free. California Senate has passed a bill limiting who police can hold for deportation. The Trust Act says only convicted felons can be held. Its supporters are calling it the anti-Arizona bill, saying it counters Arizona's immigration law. And you can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.